What's good, Tarnished? I hope you're having a wonderful day. Thank you for spending your time with me as we get into painting probably the most recognisable character from Elden Ring, bar Ranni. It's Melina.
And engage in jolly cooperation.
Traveller from beyond the fog.
I'm here to offer you an accord. Do you accept? Great! This model looks awesome and I'm thrilled I was able to print it in this size in one go. My Anycubic printer did a really good job at keeping the fine details of the cloak in. I'll leave a link in the description for this awesome model that I found online. My plan is to try out some zenithal highlighting over the top of a black primer. I've invested in some inks and a new airbrush for today's painting and I'm super excited to try it out. I left her on a shelf for a little while, so I just need to dust her off before priming her. Awesome, well, I'm just going to nip off and get this model primed and I'll be right back. Okay, so it's been like 1 to 12 weeks that Melina's been sat on my shelf, just primed and ready to go. So, apologies milady, I didn't mean to keep you waiting. As you can see, I've kept the top of the head white and sprayed downwards with black to create the contrast, as her cloak and boots are very dark, but her hair and her skin's very light, so it will react better to a brighter primer. As I mentioned before, I'm going to try out some zenithal highlighting with some new Liquitex inks that I've bought, and basically look to have the outer parts of the cloak brighter and the creases and folds much, much darker. My old knockoff airbrush just wasn't really cutting it anymore, so I decided I would invest in an Iwata Eclipse, and the difference in quality is insane. So hopefully we should end up with some decent results for this model. First up, I'm filling up the airbrush with this titanium white ink from Liquitex. This stuff is much handier than acrylic paint pots because you have this little dropper, which means you can just straight up drop in the ink into the paint cup and not have to faff around with mixing it around with a paintbrush. I guess that's why also Vallejo paints are pretty good. Anyway, like I mentioned, I'm spraying this ink over the black cloak on the most raised edges where the light would hit the most and trying to keep the deeper parts darker. It's amazing actually looking at how vibrant this white goes when you start building up extra layers, and the flow of it from the airbrush is incredible as well. Since this is a fancier airbrush, I'm making sure to take better care of cleaning it when I'm doing colour changes. And for the main colour of the cloak, I'm using one of my favourite contrast paints, which is Basilicanum Grey. Now that's created an almighty mess. I realised at this point that the PSI on the airbrush compressor was set for my old airbrush, which had a worse airflow capability, so all of this dark contrast paint shot everywhere. So, make sure you dial in the PSI correctly. For some reason I thought she had a dark green cloak, but when I look back at pictures of her, it's very obviously grey, so this contrast paint should work pretty well over this ink prime. I also bought some carbon black ink, which I'll be using to darken these dark recesses to make sure that I'm keeping this contrast strong between the lighter greys and the darker greys of the contrast paint. With another more careful colour swap and a more manageable PSI set to my compressor, I'm moving on to painting the face. Starting off with the darker tones of the skin, I'm using BUGMANS Glow, which will act as a nice reddish skin tone as the base coat, to which we'll add in lighter skin tones on top. Then I'm highlighting the lighter parts of the face with some CADIAN FLESHTONE. It probably would have been handy to actually see the angle of the face towards the camera as I painted, so you're not staring at the back of a blank head, but sometimes you just get too into it. I'm now targeting even lighter parts of the face using Kislev Flesh. Before I move on to her hair, I'm gently popping on some masking tape to the face so that I don't get any accidental hair colours to the spray job that we've just done. Kinda looks like one of the mummies from Silent Hill. Creepy. For the hair, I'm mixing in a 50-50 tone of BUGMANS Glow and Wordbearer's Red, which will act as the darker tone of the hair lower down. Then with 100% BUGMANS Glow, I'm moving higher up through the hair to target the mid-tones. For the top of the head and the lighter part, I'm mixing in some CADIAN FLESHTONE into the BUGMANS Glow and just targeting the top of the head. With that done, I'm moving on to brushing in some finer details and edge highlighting in some lighter parts of the face, mainly focusing on the nose, the chin, the cheekbones, and the brow line. I'm doing this pretty gently with very thin coats of paint so as to not create an obvious change in colour to the airbrushed colours, really only targeting the parts of the face that would take on the most light. Now for the eyes, I'm always kind of nervous painting eyes because I'm not the best at it and I feel like bad eyes ruin a good paint job, but learning from past mistakes, I'm making sure to keep this layer very thin, holding the brush very close to the tip and trying to keep my hand nice and steady as I apply it. I'm using Corax White for the whites of the eyes, obviously. And for her iris, I think she has kind of goldeny yellow eyes, which is a theme throughout Elden Ring. So I'm thinking that the AURIC Armour Gold will do a good job, as it's quite vibrant, but it's also quite a thin paint, so it should help us a lot here when doing these finer details. Then for an extra pop of colour in the iris, I'm using some Flash Glitz Yellow. For the pupils, I'm painting on some ABADDON black, but then also I'm creating little reflective highlights in the pupils with the little dots of white. I'm also creating a wash for her hair. I'm not saying she needs to wash her hair, but it's a wash for her hair, with a 50-50 mix of contrast medium and Reichland flesh shade. This should just lightly give some extra contrast to the hair, and with the medium mixed in, it shouldn't overpower any of the colours. For the little hoop on the cloak on the front, I'm just painting it with some Runelord brass because it's a nice brassy metallic colour which should look quite nice against the darkness of the cloak. For the clothes that are underneath that you can see popping over the top of the cloak, they seem to be a lightish brown or beige kind of colour, so I'm thinking some ZANDRI dust should do the trick. Then I'm mixing in some Mournfang Brown to the darker parts of the clothing and just hitting all the little folds where the shadow would be darkest and just going back and over again between these two colours to try and create a nice blend between the two. To tie that part together on the clothes, I'm just washing over some SERAPHIM Sepia, which should hopefully add in some extra colour to the browns, but also bring out some contrast and embolden these shadows a bit more. Before moving on to painting her boots, I'm just again putting masking tape over the cloak so that we don't get any wayward paint ruining her lovely clothes. To start off the boots, I'm loading up some RHINOX hide to the airbrush and thinning that down as we do to all acrylic paints that we use in an airbrush. Then I'm targeting pretty much all areas of the boots with this dark brown. Less so towards the top of the legs as they are already black from the primer, and it would already be the darkest part of the model due to the darkness created by the cloak, so no need to worry too much about that area. Then to bring in some of the highlights to the boot, we're going back to Mournfang Brown and loading that into the RHINOX hide that we already have in the airbrush to create a 50-50 mix, thinning it down obviously. Then I'm targeting the tops of the feet where the light would reflect the most and moving up slowly through the centre of the boot, creating a nice contrast from light to dark. With that done, I'm then moving on to just a pure Mournfang Brown application, repeating the previous process but making sure to target even smaller areas. Ironically, all of my dry paints have actually dried out. So for the base, I'm just dry brushing on some Celestra Grey and just doing a generic sort of dirty dry brush over all the rocks, paying more attention to the lighter areas. I'm also very lightly dry brushing on some BUGMANS Glow to areas of the hair where we lost some highlights due to the shader that we applied. You can't forget to do her eyebrows, so with some BUGMANS Glow again and making sure to hold the paintbrush closer to the tip, I'm just carefully filling in these brows to match her hair colour. I'm also filling in her lips with the BUGMANS Glow too, as if we were doing her makeup for her. Cute. I'm also just going back over areas of the face with some Kislev Flesh, just to areas that kind of need a bit more tidying up. For the seams in the leather boots, I'm just gently applying some black to them using the edge of the brush, so as to not accidentally get any of the black on this lovely leather job that we've done. I would call it edge highlighting, but it's edge darkening. Is that a phrase? Edge darkening. Edge shadowing. Then carrying on with the black and watering it down a bit more, I'm just adding in some more focus shadowing to parts of her cloak that I feel need extra shadows. Also going back in with some ZANDRI dust to highlight more of her clothes at the top. I think I'm really developing my patience as I go. Sometimes I just want to finish the model and I get bored and impatient and want to rush stuff, but I'm really making sure that I take my time with this one. Now for a tattoo over her eye, I'm just going back in again with some black, but it's time to keep that patience going and the concentration up, as the worst thing I could possibly do is to slip and get black paint all over this paint job that we've done on the face. So just being super careful and keeping a close grip to the tip. Stop it. And with the black thinned down, I'm just very carefully adding in these final tattoo details. To polish off the base, I'm just slapping a layer of Agrak's Earthshade to the rocks, just to add some contrast and colour, as it will settle into all the nooks nicely. Then I'm just painting this lovely little title plaque that's on the front with some gold, very fitting for the game's theme. You notice I also glossed her boots with some gloss varnish, but my camera died whilst I was doing that. I also mixed in some matte and gloss varnish together to apply a sateen finish to the hair and face, and then applied some matte varnish to the cloak. And that's it. With that done, I'm just going to tidy up around her. And there we are. Here Melina stands, ready to offer you an accord. Ye lowly maiden is tarnished. Thanks for joining me once again. I feel like we're really hitting a good rhythm with this series, and I'm really enjoying getting these models painted and the videos edited weekly. If you did enjoy today's episode, drop a comment and slap that like button as if it was Alexander's arse stuck in the ground. Until next time, farewell, Tarnished.